The assessment. The Galactic Confederation had catalogued over 18,000 habitable worlds across 3 spiral arms of the Milky Way. Their classification system was meticulous, categorizing planets based on environmental hazards, atmospheric composition, gravity wells, and indigenous life forms. Class 1 worlds were paradise planets, temperate, stable, and welcoming to nearly all sentient species. Class 10 worlds were termed death worlds, planets so hostile that even visiting them required specialized equipment and extensive preparation. Earth was classified as a Class 9.7 death world. Admiral Zaxvor of the Confederation Expansion Fleet studied the preliminary reports with his 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. His exoskeleton clicked softly as he shifted in his command chair. "This cannot be accurate," he muttered, mandibles twitching as he addressed his science officer. "A planet with this gravity profile shouldn't support complex life, let alone sapient species." Science officer Nyx Terra floated closer, her translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that indicated scientific curiosity. "The data is verified, Admiral. The humans not only survive on this death world, they thrive. They have achieved primitive spaceflight despite their isolation." Earth's statistics were indeed alarming. Extreme temperature variations that could freeze or boil most intelligent species. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would be toxic to 72% of Confederation races. Gravity that would crush the bones of anyone from lighter worlds. Thousands of venomous, predatory species. Regular geological upheavals. Unpredictable weather patterns, including storms that could level entire settlements. And then there were the humans themselves. Their persistence predators, continued Nyx Terra. Their thermal regulation system allows them to literally chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. They can regrow damaged tissue. They consume substances that would be lethal to most species for pleasure. And their history suggests they spend more resources developing weapons than any other technology. Admiral Zaxvor tapped a command into his neural interface. "Standard protocol for Deathworlders is observation only. We monitor until they either destroy themselves or achieve interstellar capability." "There's something else, Admiral." Nyx Terra's luminescence shifted to a warning pattern. "Their global information network suggests they've detected our observation platforms. They're actively looking for us now." The Admiral's dermal plates darkened with concern. Deathworlders becoming aware of galactic civilization prematurely was precisely what the Confederation sought to avoid. Their unpredictable nature made first contact protocols especially delicate. "Prepare a diplomatic vessel. We need to establish communication before they misinterpret our presence." 3 solar cycles later, the first official contact between humanity and the Galactic Confederation ended in disaster. The diplomatic vessel, approaching with peaceful intentions, was fired upon by multiple Earth nations, each fearing the others might gain advantage from alien contact. The diplomats barely escaped, and 7 different human military forces claimed credit for repelling the invasion. "They're fractured," observed Tactical Officer Krell, a reptilian strategist with metallic scales and calculating eyes. "Their planet has no unified government. They organize by geographical regions, ideological systems, and cultural backgrounds. Nearly 200 distinct political entities." Admiral Zaxvor reviewed the updated intelligence, identified the dominant powers. "We need to understand their hierarchy." "That's the problem, sir. The hierarchy is complex and fluid, but we've identified several power centers with significant military capabilities. This region," Krell highlighted a landmass on the holographic display, "called America, appears particularly significant." "In what way?" "It possesses the most advanced weaponry, but that's not what makes it noteworthy. Our analysts find their cultural patterns disturbing. They celebrate individual defiance against authority. Their entertainment glorifies violence. Their population possesses more personal weapons than any other region, and they have a historical pattern of prevailing in conflicts despite statistical disadvantages." The Admiral considered this information carefully. Your recommendation? A show of force, Krell replied without hesitation. Deathworlders respect strength above all. The Confederation fleet could neutralize their orbital capabilities and establish dominance without significant casualties. Science Officer Nix Terra pulsed with disagreement. Respectfully, Admiral, human psychology suggests they often unite against external threats. A military approach could be counterproductive. We've attempted diplomacy, countered Krell. They responded with violence. The debate continued for days, with the Confederation's most experienced synopsychologists and military strategists offering conflicting perspectives. Eventually, a compromise was reached, a limited intervention to establish contact with Earth's most influential governments, backed by sufficient military presence to ensure safety but not to threaten planetary security. The plan failed spectacularly. The appearance of 27 Confederation vessels in Earth's orbit triggered immediate panic. Despite attempts to communicate peaceful intentions, human military forces launched everything in their arsenal. The primitive missiles and nuclear weapons posed no real threat to Confederation shields, but the response was telling. They're actually willing to irradiate their own atmosphere to repel us, noted Communications Officer Ilara, her crystalline form resonating with disbelief. Implement containment protocol, ordered Admiral Zaxvor reluctantly. Minimal force, targeted disarmament only. The Confederation's precision strikes against military installations were designed to minimize casualties while demonstrating technological superiority. It should have led to quick capitulation. Instead, it ignited a global resistance unlike anything in Confederation records. While most nations eventually opened diplomatic channels after the initial shock, the region identified as America responded differently. Their formal military was neutralized within days, but then the true nightmare began. Lieutenant Commander Riley Harper watched the alien ships through her binoculars from the Montana wilderness. 38 years old, with weather-beaten features and eyes that had seen too much combat in too many countries, Harper had been on leave when the invasion began. Now, she was the highest-ranking officer in what remained of her unit. 12 Marines, 3 Army Rangers, and a Navy corpsman, all that had escaped when their base was vaporized. They hit anything with a uniform or a flag, she told her makeshift squad. But they're not targeting civilians yet. That gives us options. Options for what, Commander? Asked Corporal Martinez, a young Marine whose face still showed the shock of seeing his entire company eliminated in seconds. Their tech is decades beyond ours. Maybe centuries. Harper checked her rifle. A simple mechanical weapon with no electronic components that might be detected. For reminding them why you don't corner Americans. Within weeks, similar groups formed across the country. Veterans, hunters, law enforcement, and ordinary citizens with no military background, but plenty of firearms and a deep-seated resistance to occupation. They communicated using pre-digital methods, handwritten notes, signal mirrors, ham radios operating on irregular schedules and frequencies. The Confederation's advanced sensors, designed to detect energy weapons and power sources, struggled to track humans using combustion firearms and mechanical traps. Their artificial intelligence, programmed to identify military formations and conventional tactics, couldn't predict the seemingly random actions of decentralized resistance cells. When Confederation forces established a forward operating base outside what remained of Chicago, they found their supply lines harassed by attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. Vehicles disappeared. Small patrols vanished. Equipment malfunctioned in ways that suggested deliberate sabotage rather than technical failure. They're adapting to our technology at an alarming rate, reported Krell. They've already begun incorporating salvaged components into improvised weapons. How? Demanded Admiral Zaxvor. They shouldn't be able to understand our systems, let alone repurpose them. They don't understand the principles, explained Nix Terra. They're applying brute force experimentation. They try combinations until something works, with no regard for the theoretical fundamentals or safety protocols. Like watching primitives play with antimatter, muttered Krell. The Admiral's command center received a transmission from the Chicago base. The commanding officer appeared agitated, his protective armor showing signs of damage. "We're facing organized resistance beyond anything anticipated," he reported. "The humans are using their own terrain against us. They know every building, every tunnel, every approach. They've booby-trapped entire neighborhoods. And, sir, they're not afraid to die. All species fear death," stated the Admiral. "Not like this. They charge our positions with inadequate protection. They detonate explosives while still within the blast radius. They sacrifice themselves to allow others to attack. And they leave messages, disturbing messages. Show me." The officer transmitted images of crude writing left at attack sites. "Don't tread on me. Live free or die. From my cold, dead hands. We the people." Phrases that meant nothing to Confederation translators, but clearly held cultural significance for the human fighters. "The other regions are struggling, but they're negotiating," continued the officer. "This America is different. One prisoner we managed to capture told us, every American is a militia of one, before he somehow killed himself while fully restrained." Admiral Zaxvor closed his 4 eyes briefly, processing this information. "Maintain containment. Minimize engagement. I need to consult with the Confederation Council." The transmission ended, and the Admiral turned to his advisors. "We've miscalculated. These humans, especially these Americans, are unlike any species we've encountered. They're not just surviving on a death world. They've been shaped by it. Their entire psychology is built around overcoming impossible odds." "What are your orders, Admiral?" asked Krell. Zaxvor studied the holographic display of Earth, focusing on the landmass that had become a nightmare for his forces. "Prepare a new approach. If we cannot subdue them by force, perhaps we can reach them through understanding." But as he issued this order, reports arrived of humans breaching a Confederation vessel for the first time, not with superior technology, but with relentless determination and improvised weapons that no civilized species would have conceived. The game had changed. The Confederation had classified Earth as a death world. They were beginning to realize that was an underestimation. The reckoning. The Galactic Confederation had never retreated from a Class 9 or lower planet. Their technological superiority had always been sufficient to establish dominance, even against the most hostile environments and resistant species. Earth, specifically the region called America, was about to break that record. 3 months into the occupation, Admiral Zaxvor summoned his senior staff to the command vessel orbiting Earth. The mood was somber. The gleaming chamber, usually a showcase of Confederation elegance, now felt oppressive. "Our containment of major population centers outside America has been largely successful," began Tactical Officer Krell. "The human governments in regions designated Europe, Asia, and Africa have established working relationships with our administrative teams. There are isolated resistance movements, but nothing coordinated. And America?" asked the Admiral, though he already knew the answer. Krell's metallic scales shifted uncomfortably. "We control no territory there in any meaningful sense. We hold orbital superiority and can strike any fixed position, but ground forces make no progress. We've lost 16% of our deployed units and 32% of our equipment." Science Officer Nix Terra floated forward, her bioluminescence pulsing with agitation. "The humans are reverse engineering our technology at an alarming rate. They don't understand the principles, but they're highly effective at repurposing components. They've already created rudimentary energy weapons from salvaged shield generators." "How is this possible?" demanded Zaxvor. "Their technological level is centuries behind ours." "It's their adaptive capacity," explained Nix Terra. "Most species develop technology along predictable paths. Humans, especially in this America region, pursue multiple approaches simultaneously. Their scientific method embraces failure as a learning tool. They experiment recklessly." Communications Officer Ilara added, "And they share information horizontally." No hierarchical approval process. A discovery made by one resistance cell spreads to others almost instantly, through channels we cannot track or intercept. The Admiral paced the command deck, his exoskeleton clicking with each step. What about our infiltration units? The biomimetic observers? Krell's response was terse. Compromised. The Americans have developed methods to identify them through behavioral cues. 23 infiltrators have been captured or destroyed, and the information extracted from them unknown, but we must assume significant compromise. Admiral Zaxvor faced the reality that confronted him. The Confederation's standard protocols for planetary integration had failed completely. Either they would need to escalate to orbital bombardment, effectively sterilizing large portions of a habitable planet, which violated core Confederation principles, or they needed a new approach entirely. "Show me their leaders," he ordered. "Who coordinates this resistance?" The holographic display flickered, showing dozens of human faces. "That's the problem, Admiral," said Ilara. "There is no central leadership. The resistance consists of thousands of small groups operating independently. They share some common symbols and phrases, but no unified command structure we can target." One face on the display caught the Admiral's attention, a human female with weathered features and determined eyes. "Who is this one?" Lieutenant Commander Riley Harper, former officer in their Naval Infantry Corps. "She's responsible for some of the most effective adaptations of our technology. Her group destroyed the perimeter defenses at our Chicago base using reprogrammed maintenance drones. I want to speak with her." The command staff exchanged alarmed glances. "Admiral," began Krell, "direct negotiation with resistance leaders could be perceived as weakness." "We have already demonstrated our strength," replied Zaxvor. "It has not worked. Now we must try understanding." Meanwhile, 300 miles west of Chicago, Riley Harper and her team were examining their latest acquisition, a mostly intact Confederation scout vessel forced down by coordinated EMP bursts from modified power cells. "Their navigation system is biological," observed Dr. Ellis, a former university physicist who had joined Harper's group after his laboratory was destroyed. "It's literally alive, some kind of engineered symbiotic organism." Harper studied the pulsing crystalline structure. "Can we communicate with it?" "Maybe. It responds to electrical stimuli. We might be able to establish a rudimentary interface." Their work was interrupted by a young lookout who entered the abandoned mine shaft they were using as a temporary base. "Commander, we're picking up a transmission on all frequencies. They're asking for you by name." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Now that's interesting. They finally figured out who's been giving them the most trouble." The communication system they'd assembled from salvaged parts displayed a clear image of Admiral Zaxvor. Harper studied the alien carefully, her first direct look at the being coordinating the occupation of her planet. "Lieutenant Commander Harper," began the Admiral, "I propose a direct discussion regarding the current conflict." "I'm listening," replied Harper cautiously. "The Galactic Confederation has no desire for prolonged hostilities. Our standard protocol for deep-world civilizations is observation only until they achieve interstellar capability naturally. The current intervention was necessitated by premature detection of our observation platforms." Harper laughed. "So you invaded because we spotted your spy satellites. That's quite an overreaction." "A miscalculation," admitted the Admiral. "We underestimated both your species' territorial instincts and your adaptive capabilities." "You still don't get it," said Harper. "This isn't about territory. It's about freedom. Americans don't respond well to being told what to do, especially by foreigners with superior firepower. We've been practicing asymmetric warfare since our country was founded." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "Your historical records indicate your nation was created through successful resistance against a technologically matched imperial power, not a superior one. The principle is the same. We're stubborn, creative, and we don't know when to quit." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with both sides probing for understanding rather than advantage. It ended with an unprecedented proposal, a direct meeting between Confederation representatives and key resistance figures with mutually agreed security protocols. 3 days later, Admiral Zaxvor stood in an abandoned factory in what had once been Detroit, accompanied only by Science Officer Nix Terra and 2 security drones. The building had been chosen for its isolation and multiple escape routes, a concession to the humans' paranoia. Harper arrived with 4 of her people, all armed with a mixture of conventional weapons and modified Confederation technology. The contrast was striking: the Admiral's tall, exoskeletal form and Nix Terra's floating, translucent body against the humans' comparatively fragile but intensely practical appearance. "You've caused us considerable difficulty, Commander," began the Admiral. "That was the idea," replied Harper. "Though I might say the same about you. Hard to maintain critical infrastructure with orbital bombardment happening every other Tuesday. A regrettable necessity. Your resistance cells were using power distribution centers as assembly points." Harper nodded. "Because we knew you could track energy signatures but couldn't distinguish between civilian and military usage. We adapted." The Admiral made a gesture that might have been respect. "Your species adapts faster than any we have encountered. It is both your greatest strength and a significant concern for the Confederation." "Concern or opportunity?" suggested Harper. "Depends on your perspective." Science Officer Nix Terra pulsed with curiosity. "Elaborate, please." "Look, you've seen what humans can do when backed into a corner. But that same adaptability, that creativity, it could be an asset in whatever galactic community you're building. We solve problems differently because we evolved on a death world, as you call it." The discussion that followed explored possibilities neither side had previously considered. The humans described their history of absorbing and transforming foreign influences, of turning adversaries into allies. The Confederation representatives explained the greater galactic context, threats and challenges beyond Earth that required cooperative approaches. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Zaxvor made an unprecedented decision. "I will recommend to the Confederation Council that Earth be reclassified, not as a conquered world, nor merely as an observed one, but as a potential member species with unique capabilities." "And your forces?" asked Harper. "Will withdraw from American territory immediately, and from other regions as cooperative frameworks are established." The transition wasn't smooth. Many on both sides resisted the change in approach. But the alternative, a prolonged, destructive conflict that neither side truly wanted, was less appealing than the challenging path of cooperation. 6 months later, human representatives attended their first Confederation conclave. They were viewed with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and reluctant respect. Earth remained classified as a death world, but with a special annotation. Indigenous sapients demonstrate exceptional adaptive capabilities and novel problem-solving approaches. Integration protocols must acknowledge and incorporate these traits rather than suppress them. A separate note was attached to briefing materials for any Confederation personnel assigned to Earth. Exercise particular caution in regions self-identified as America. Approach with respect rather than authority. Direct control attempts will be actively resisted. Collaborative frameworks yield better results. Admiral Zaxvor, now serving as liaison to Earth's transitional government, sometimes reflected on how close they had come to a disastrous outcome. The Confederation had encountered hundreds of species, but none that combined humans' adaptability, tenacity, and almost irrational defiance of overwhelming odds. Earth was indeed a death world that produced uniquely formidable inhabitants, but they were beginning to understand that this was precisely what made humans valuable. In a galaxy of predictable problems, sometimes you needed a species crazy enough to try the impossible. And no one did impossible quite like the humans of Earth, especially those stubborn, creative, terrifying Americans.